My name is John History, and I invented history as we know it in the year 7. Although I was heckled by my peers, why do we need to write things down? We have memories for a reason. I persevered. I have 2 PhDs, one in history of the church and a second in weather-related horseball shrinkage. I have won 17 Nobel Prizes, and I like to play tennis with a spatula in my free time. Now on to the film. Okay.
One baby to another set.
You know, people talk a lot about Rome, Athens, Babylon, but in the book of Acts, everything starts in Jerusalem. It's where Jesus tells his followers, wait here, and they do. And then all of a sudden, boom, the Holy Spirit comes down. People are speaking in tongues. How long do you think we're going to be here for?
I don't know, man. Just pray.
It's been a really long time. What did you just say? What do you even... I have a dream. You want to know the most important idea in the book of Acts? One simple word: evangelism. Peter preaches and thousands believe. Stephen stands up even when it costs him his life. And Paul, he takes the word of God on a world tour like he's Green Day. Every miracle, every journey, every sermon, it's all about one thing, and that's spreading the word of Jesus Christ. Evangelism isn't just some side story in Act. It is the story. And the best part, it's still happening today. Want to know who steals the spotlight in the book of Acts? It's Paul. Yep, the guy who started off hunting Christians ends up becoming Christianity's biggest champion. Pretty crazy, huh? At first, Paul was named Saul. He was strict, smart, and scary. But then, bam! He meets Jesus on the road to Damascus. Flash of light, voice from heaven. Instantly, his life changed. From there, he's unstoppable, traveling everywhere, preaching, making churches, and surviving shipwrecks, beatings, and jail. But he keeps going. Paul's mission spreads the gospel beyond Jerusalem, throughout the Roman world. He basically takes the good news global. Without Paul, Acts would be half as long, and the church would have stayed a small fringe group. But thanks to him, Christianity conquered the world, Alexander the Great style. In this chapter, the most important character is St. Augustine of Hippo, easily one of the greatest thinkers in church history. He wasn't just any theologian, he was a very influential Christian thinker who shaped the way Christians think about God's salvation, sin, and heaven and hell. What made Augustine very unique was how he incorporated philosophy, like ancient Greek philosophy, into Christian theology. He studied the works of great thinkers like Plato and Socrates and incorporated them to deepen Christian beliefs. This blending of philosophy and theology assisted the church greatly by making complex ideas easier to understand. Augustine's writings not only shaped the church at his time, but are still very influential today. In this chapter, the most important location isn't just some city, it's a little bigger. I'm talking Roman Empire bigger. This is where everything takes place. Paul's missions, the persecution, the preaching, it all happened within Roman borders. And then comes a major turning point. Christianity is legalized within the Roman Empire. No more hiding, no more danger, no more fear. For the first time in forever, believers could worship openly. The Roman Empire went from trying to kill Christianity to helping it spread. That's why the Roman Empire is easily the most important location in this chapter. It wasn't just the background, it was the stage where history and faith collided. If there's one event that shaped Christianity in this chapter, it would have to be the Nicene Creed. Many believers believed different things, which caused much division in the church. Before the Creed, there was much confusion about who Jesus really was. The Creed came as a powerful statement about what Christians believe about God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The most important idea in this chapter was the creation of new doctrine. It wasn't just writing down new rules and codes, it was reforming Christianity itself. Over time, different beliefs and practices confused many Christians on how they were supposed to live. The church needed answers fast. Thanks to these new doctrines, Christianity was reformed and was ready to grow stronger. Without this, the church might have stayed divided and unclear, and brought believers together with clearer understanding. These teachings helped the church focus on the true message. So, new doctrines were developed in the church to answer many questions like, who is Jesus? How does salvation work? What is sin? What is grace? Lamego. So I'm reading this chapter, And one thing really jumps off the page: the rise of Islam. It's not just some event, it changes everything. For centuries, Christianity has been the dominant religious force across all of Europe. Then, suddenly, boom, here comes Islam and a brand new religion. It's not just creeping in slowly, it spreads fast. In just a few decades, Islam moves across the whole Middle East, across North Africa, and even into Spain. And it wasn't just about geography. Islam became a serious religious competitor to Christianity. Two major faiths influencing politics, culture, and daily life. And that shift starts right here in this chapter. Everything else in this chapter, the battles, the trade routes, the power struggles, it all connects back to Islam somehow. So yeah, if there's one idea that has to define this chapter, it's the rise of Islam. For this chapter, I'd like to hand you off to my good friend, John Weapon. My name is John Weapon. Okay, this chapter has a lot going on, but if you zoom out, one event really stands above all the rest. The Crusades. Why, you may ask? Well, it's the first time most of Europe came together for something big. Think about that. Kings, knights, and even peasants. They were all putting aside their differences and marching together towards one goal. We can barely do that today with organizations like NATO, and they were doing it back then. And they weren't just heading out for a quick trip. This was a massive military campaign that pulled people into a whole new world. Literally. They went into the Middle East, clashed with powerful empires, and things didn't leave the same. Kind of reminds me of something.
Shit! Hey, get some shots out there!
Weapons of mass destruction.
Hey, get in the f***ing fight! Let's go! Start shooting!
So many lives. So many civilians.
Just taking cover, you got more coming. Jesus Christ, like a fucking 30 kid.
What happened in the past.
killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate.
You killed a million
Lay it
people
down.
in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the...
Well, under the definition of torture, no, it's not. Under the law, torture is excruciating pain that is equivalent to losing organs and systems. So under the definition of torture, it is not. It is back waterboarding. And I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding.
Where is Saddam Hussein?
The Crusades shook up everything. Religion, trade, power structures, cities changed hands, sometimes multiple times, and new ideas flowed between Europe and the Islamic world. It was like someone put all of Europe and the Middle East in a snow globe and then shook it all up. Everything was screwed. So yeah, other events in this chapter, they're interesting, but the Crusades, they transformed everything. Wow, that's happening today. Oh, didn't see you there. If you read this chapter, there's one location that ties everything together, and that's Middle Ages Europe. It's not just a backdrop, it's where everything happens. Every major event, power struggle, conflict, it's all rooted in one time and place. Kings are fighting for their land, the church is rising in power, and society is shaped by feudalism. This isn't just the stage, it's the engine driving the whole story. And Middle Ages Europe was the hotbed that created the Great Schism. You've got tensions brewing between the Eastern and Western churches, political pressure, religious pride, and it's all happening because of the cultures and power struggles of medieval Europe. Without this setting, the Great Schism wouldn't have happened in the way that it did. It was the perfect storm, and it all came from what was boiling under the surface of Europe at the time. Ever read a book and realize one character just carries the whole thing? Well, that's how I felt about St. Patrick in this chapter. In this chapter, he's not just some side note, he is the reason Ireland gets converted. The guy literally converted an entire nation. Before him, Ireland was full of old Celtic traditions. But then St. Patrick shows up and introduces an entirely new belief system. That's not small, that's history changing. And he was a born Roman citizen, which means he was educated. He wasn't just some wandering preacher, he was legit. He used his background to reach people and teach them better. So I thought to myself, how is that not the most important character in this chapter? So yeah, when you read this chapter, remember, it's not just about Ireland. It's about one Roman guy who changed everything. And that's why St. Patrick's the GOAT.
Imprisoning me, all that I see.
My name is John Marston.
My name is John Marston!
And in this chapter, the most important location isn't just some random cathedral or city in Europe. It's the New World, baby. You may be asking, why? Well, it's the place where history and faith collided. Christian powers arrived, conquering lands, but also bringing their culture and religion. It wasn't just a conquest, it was a conversion. Missionaries followed these famous explorers, and soon, huge swaths of the New World were completely Christian. For better or for worse, the New World became the new stage of the church. New people, new lands, new problems, and global spread of the gospel. And that's why the New World, it matters so much in this chapter. Now, I've got to go find Dutch, Arthur, and Hosea and get to some shenanigans.
Where are the missiles?
Hi there. I'm Christian Craighead, and I'm here to talk to you about the most important event in this chapter. Now, after doing many hours of thorough research, I have determined the most important event in this chapter has to be the Renaissance. It wasn't just about kings and paintings. It was a full-blown transformation of the church. Before the Renaissance, churches were plain, boring even. But then, boom, color, light, music. Artists and architects started making things that didn't just decorate the church, it inspired those worshiping in them. It reminds me of Nairobi. Cathedrals got taller, stained glass told stories, choirs filled the air with heavenly harmonies. Music wasn't just there in the background, it became part of the message. And it wasn't just about beauty. These changes made the church just feel alive, because it didn't just reform art and architecture. It completely changed the way people experience God. I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Yay, I'm saved!
You can't baptize him. He's a slave. He's property, not a person.
Does he look like a person?
Yeah, I guess.
Does he act like a person?
Yeah, I guess.
Does he walk like a person?
Yeah, I guess.
How does the old saying go? Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, is a duck?
Yeah, I should be a better person.
And that is why St. Peter de Claver is the most important person in this chapter. You may be wondering, what's the most important idea in this chapter? Easily, exploration. It didn't just change maps, it changed the world. Because of exploration, the New World was discovered. Entirely new continents that Europe had never seen before. Hey, is that a 14th century Spanish ship on that clearly fake ocean? Ugh, I hate this. Why can't we just be on land?
Land ho!
Have you guys heard the good news?
Oh, that Jesus guy? The Portuguese told us all about him last week.
Dang it. If there was only one person in this chapter that I would have to pick for being the most important, hands down, it would have to be Martin Luther. His impact wasn't just important, it was world-changing. Luther didn't just disagree with the church. He was saying the system is broke. He had the courage to say it out loud when few others dared. When he posted his 95 Theses on that church door, he sparked something entirely new. Protestantism. And that's why Martin Luther is the most important person in this chapter. He saw the truth, he spoke up, and he never backed down. And what came out of that, you may ask? A new direction for millions of people to take, a reformed faith, and a movement in history we're still feeling today. When you look at this chapter, one event really sticks out to you: the Protestant Reformation. It wasn't just a religious dispute. It was a turning point that shook the foundations of Europe. Before the Reformation, the Catholic Church had enormous control. It influenced not just people's beliefs, but also politics in their daily lives. But the Protestant Reformation directly challenged that. People like Martin Luther, who I was previously speaking about, began asking very bold questions at the time. This was the first time in centuries people had truly pushed back against a governing force. They called out corruption, rejected certain doctrines, and most importantly, they demanded change. And for the first time, they weren't completely destroyed like previous rebellions. The result, you may ask? Massive change. Entire countries broke away from the Catholic Church, like France. New Christian denominations were formed, like Presbyterianism. People read the Bible in their own languages instead of in Latin. They formed their own ideas about faith, for better or for worse. The Reformation opened a door, and once it opened, history took a different path. Why is Western Europe the most important place in this chapter? Two major reasons: religion and war. First, this is where the 30 Years' War happened, from 1618 to 1648. It was one of the deadliest conflicts in European history, and it all started in the Holy Roman Empire, modern-day Germany. The war was about power and religion, and that leads us to reason number 2, Protestantism. Western Europe is also where Protestantism began. In 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church in Wittenberg. That moment sparked the Protestant Reformation, which changed Christianity and history forever. So from revolutions to decades-long wars, Western Europe wasn't just important, it shaped the whole story. When you take a good look at this chapter, one idea really stands out to you. Reform. Not just as a word, but as a force. Something that changed everything. It started within the church itself. Big changes. Not small edits or surface tweaks, but major shifts in power, practice, and beliefs. Things that have been untouchable for generations were suddenly open to challenge. Leaders began asking hard questions. And more importantly, they started doing things about the answers. New voices emerged. Corruption was called out. Traditions were examined, and little by little, the church started to look very, very different. These weren't cosmic changes. They were structural, foundational. But reform didn't just stay inside the church walls. It spread. People saw what was happening, and their opinions on things began to shift. The church had once been the ultimate authority, but now people were thinking for themselves, asking questions and demanding better. That's the real power of reform. It doesn't just fix broken systems, it changes how people think. And when minds change, history changes.
My name is Donald John Trump, and I am the President of the United States of America. I am here today to talk to you about that little man Napoleon. When you hear Napoleon, many think, oh, a military genius. I am one of those people myself. Others may think of the short guy in the funny hat, the Frenchman. We do not like the French. But this chapter makes it very, very clear that he is much more than any preconceived thoughts about him. Napoleon is the most important person because of the way he shaped France and Europe like no one else, except for maybe Hitler. I have been equated to Hitler. I am not. First, he understood that France was not just about politics and war. It was also about faith. I am a religious man myself. A non-denominational. After all of the chaos of the French Revolution, Napoleon, he acknowledged the importance of faith in the new France. He did not ignore religion. Instead, he brought it back as a key part of society, balancing modern ideas with tradition. That's what I'm doing now. We're making America great. Ignore all the statistics. At the same time, Napoleon was off being a militarily genius man. He was off conquering a chunk of France. He was off conquering a chunk of Europe. Much like Hitler. People say I'm like Hitler. I'm not. I assure you. From Spain to Poland, his armies changed the political map of Europe forever. I hope to do the same. His conquest spread ideas, some good, some not so good. That is how I am not like Napoleon. All of my ideas are good. All of my ideas are good. But his influence was undeniable. Much like my influence. So, in conclusion, Napoleon was not just a warlord. I have been called a warlord. I am not a warlord. I have not started any wars. He was a leader. that blended old and new, much like myself, faith and power, France and Europe.
I'm John History. I'm back. I don't know what Trump was here. He showed up, barged in my house, into my studies, and did a bit, I guess. Anyways, when I first read this chapter, I noticed, why is it talking about science so much? It doesn't seem very important. However, it turns out science is hands down the most important idea in this chapter, and for some pretty powerful reasons. Back then, science was just about cool experiments like it is now. It was about shaking up the whole world because it opposed what the church said was true. Imagine that. Like, the church saying, this is how the universe works, this is how everything works, this is how the world exists, for centuries. And then all of a sudden, these dudes with cool-looking beards show up and are like, nah, evolution, we're monkeys. And that's the key. Science was supported by stuff that you could go out and figure out yourself if you had a little bit of know-how, whereas religion was more of you just kind of had to trust them. Now, obviously, this shook everything up. People were thinking for themselves. This, along with the Protestant Reformation, this idea challenged the old ways, caused people to rethink their beliefs, and it sparked a new way of understanding how things work, which is, you can't even imagine that now. It's quite apparent that science is easily the most important idea in this chapter. When you think about big moments in history, France often pops up. Well, this chapter makes it clear. France is obviously the most important location. And here's why. First, the French Revolution. It wasn't just a political shakeup. It was a seismic event that affected the entire world. It challenged the old ways, including the power of the church, along with things like the monarchy. Suddenly, people started asking pretty crazy questions. And France became the epicenter of the massive change that shook not just the country, but the whole globe. And that's not all. France was also a major Catholic empire for centuries, a sheer powerhouse of faith and culture. It shaped Catholicism in ways that still affect us today. The French Revolution, it affected things like education, art, politics, and all of those obviously affect us today. So in this chapter, it isn't just telling us that France is an important place. It's showing us how France was a battleground of faith and ideas. It was where revolution met religion. Next time you're watching the news, people are talking about freedom, political change, political movements. France probably affected that. So picture this, you're reading the chapter, and then all of a sudden, beliefs start shifting, power starts shifting, ways of thinking start shifting. All of that's just a byproduct of the Enlightenment, really. And in this particular chapter, the Enlightenment is easily the most important. Why? It flipped the script on the whole world. For centuries, the church had all the answers. Something happened, the explanation was God wills it. But then the Enlightenment happened, and people start saying, hold up, let's use some reason here. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on other than just believing them. Suddenly, science isn't just a side project taken on by monks and monasteries. Not because they hated religion, but they wanted proof. They wanted tangible evidence of these things that were happening and why. And the Enlightenment propagated all of that. This chapter specifically shows how the Enlightenment didn't just give us new ideas. And that's why the period of the Enlightenment is most important in this chapter.
I'm covering my ears like a kid.
This chapter is packed with people, places, and events. But to me, at least, one name really stands out. Pope Leo XIII. Some of that might be because there's a Pope Leo XIV. But I digress. And once you actually read about what he did, it's very clear to see why he's obviously the most important person in this chapter. Let's start with the big one. At a time when workers were being pushed to their limits in factories with long hours, low pay, and just horrible, disgusting conditions, Pope Leo advocated for those poor workers. He said this isn't right. He stood up to the big he stood up to the fledgling corporations that now control everything today. And he didn't just whisper these beliefs to his inner circle. He wrote a whole document about it. It's called Rerum Novarum. He was one of the first global voices to really advocate for workers, like with their pay, with their environments that they worked in, especially when it pulls people away from things like their values, their families, and their faith. He was one of the first global voices. So in a world spinning with industrial growth and social change, Pope Leo became sort of moral compass. He reminded people to slow down, think about justice, think about, is this right, is this moral? Well, that's why he's obviously the most important person in this chapter. What's the big idea in this chapter? Easily, hands down, social change. Not machines, not leaders, not global superpowers. But no, screw all that stuff. Social change. Social change is easily the most important idea in this. You got to think about it in the big picture. When society changes with the social change, or society, everything changes. Because we all live in a society. People start thinking differently, living differently, working differently. So first, let's talk about money. The social changes I'm referring to started new economic ideas like capitalism, communism, socialism, but it also created unions and wages. Like, that stuff didn't just magically appear sometime. All that stuff came as humanity's knee-jerk reaction to these social and societal changes. Cities were growing, factories were being raised up, filling the air with smog. And it wasn't just about jobs and money, it was about relationships between people too. Social change transformed how families interacted with each other. They went from, you live on the countryside, you make some clothes, and your neighbor a few miles away he has chickens or something. So then you trade those. But now you're living in the city, and you gotta pay for everything, and you gotta work all the time, and it sucks. People who had never interacted before were now neighbors and co-workers. So yeah, it's plain to see that societal and social change was the most important idea in this chapter. In this chapter, the most important location is America. Not because of burgers or baseball. No, because America was a major location for the Industrial Revolution. Factories, railways, smoke, steel, all of that is from the Industrial Revolution. And while other countries were slowly industrializing, like many countries in Europe, America did it really fast. Like, they did it remarkably quick compared to other countries at the same level as them. And here's what made it the center of the chapter: capitalism. America didn't just build stuff, it turned production into profit. From steel factories and tuna canning plants to Henry Ford's car assembly line. America wasn't just working, it was hustling. This chapter shows how America became a symbol of modern industry and a free market economy. It didn't just join the Industrial Revolution like everyone else. It cranked it to 11 and threw in a stock exchange. When it comes to big turning points in history, this chapter makes it very clear. The Industrial Revolution was the most important event in this chapter. Before it, life mostly centered around farms. People worked on the land, lived in small communities, and made what they need. They didn't make a ton of excess things. But then, boom, suddenly everything changed. Machines came in, factories were built, and suddenly, major economies shifted from farming to industry. But with all that growth came serious problems. Cities moved fast and jobs moved indoors. Factories weren't just noisy, they were dangerous. Dangerous to work in, dangerous to live around. People worked long hours for little pay. Even kids worked in these places. Conditions got so bad that the church had to step in and say, hey, this isn't right, you gotta stop doing this. Religious leaders globally were calling out these inhumane conditions and fighting against them, pushing for dignity, safety, and fairness. This chapter clearly shows that the Industrial Revolution didn't just build machines and factories. It built a whole new world. You know, when people talk about World War I, they usually talk about the generals, the politics, the battles, the lead-up. Not in this chapter. This chapter puts the spotlight on someone else. The man who led the church through World War I. Pope Benedict XV. Pope Benedict XV. Imagine this. Europe's tearing itself apart in a war. Millions are suffering. Countries that are divided and distrustful. And here's Benedict, jumping face first into that storm. He wasn't just some distant religious figure. He was a peacemaker, trying to bring dialogue where there was none. Think about it. During a war that completely destroyed the world, in the middle of all that, he's reaching out to leaders, urging for peace, offering to take refugees, and even advocating for mercy. Sure, he couldn't stop the fighting overnight, but his efforts laid a foundation. He showed that the church wasn't isolated or powerless. It was a force for hope and reconciliation. I believe this chapter highlights Benedict XV because he represents a bridge between faith and politics, war and peace, suffering and compassion. So next time you're thinking about World War I, remember Benedict. He was a major player, even if you don't think he was. When thinking about this chapter, one place clearly stands out. Not just because it's mentioned a bunch, but it's actually where most of the major events happen in this chapter. Let's start with the wars. World War I, World War II. Both of those, obviously, Western Europe. The battles, the destruction, the alliances, the rebuild, all centered in Western Europe, and many of the major decisions that happened to occur in Western Europe shaped the 20th century. But that's not all. Also, one of the most important religious events happened in Western Europe. Vatican II, Second Vatican. It was held in Rome and was where the Catholic Church decided to face the future. The Second Vatican Council reformed church teachings, made worship more accessible, and opened the door to modern thinking. And obviously, it happened in Western Europe. The most important idea in this chapter is modernization. Not just as a trend, but as a decision in a direction, and a turning point for the church. That's what the church was asking itself at Vatican II. How do we stay meaningful in a world that's changing so fast? Mass became spoken in local languages instead of just in Latin. There was more interfaith dialogue. These changes signified a huge turning point for the church. Modernization was also very necessary in this scenario. The world was heading into a new era. Technology was advancing rapidly, societies were becoming more diverse, and regular people were asking deeper questions. The church could no longer stay stuck in the past if it wanted to reach people in the present. In conclusion, modernization wasn't just helpful, it was essential for the church. In this chapter, the most important event isn't some battle or war. It's the Second Vatican Council, and it changed everything. For centuries, the Catholic Church had followed the same traditions. Mass was in Latin, and the church stayed mostly distant from the modern world. People heard the church, but they weren't really listening. By the 1960s, the world had changed significantly, and it was time the church changed too. That's where Vatican II came in. It was a bold decision to modernize. Suddenly, Mass was spoken in their very own local languages. People could really understand what was being said. And the church started talking with other Christian denominations as well as other faiths. This wasn't a small update. It was a massive change coming for the church. And that is why the Second Vatican Council is the most important event in this chapter. How did Pope John Paul II start his day? Let's take a look. 5 a.m., wake up, no alarm, just divine discipline. Morning prayer, quiet reflection, maybe also checking if it's still dark outside. Then he brushed his teeth while brushing up on scripture. Holy multitasking. Little bit of exercise, gotta keep that papal posture righteous. Then, more prayer, some writing, a little bit of coffee, holy caffeine. Another day to serve. And that is how Pope John Paul II started his mornings, with focus, faith, and yes, also probably some holy breath mints. The most important idea in this chapter is global inclusion. It's the idea that the church isn't just for one people, one language, one region. It's for everyone. It's for the globe. We can see this clearly through the actions of John Paul II. He didn't just stay within the walls of the Vatican. He traveled everywhere, visiting over 100 countries and meeting people from every single continent, except maybe Antarctica. The goal was simple but powerful: to show everyone that the church is for every part of the world. And Pope Francis continued on his legacy in a very real way. One of the biggest things he did was trying to reflect the church's leadership proportionally for the globe. He made cardinals in places that didn't have them before, like Myanmar, Tonga, South Sudan. These choices sent a strong message. The church is for all, not just Europe, not just the West, everyone. Global inclusion means to recognize the faith, culture, and beliefs of everyone everywhere, not just one particular region, not just one particular language, everyone. In this chapter, there's one location that keeps popping up again and again, and that's the modern Western world. Countries like the US, the UK, Germany, and France, they all play a central role to the ideas and events discussed in this chapter. It's where some of the most important political decisions were made. Their influence spread across the globe through governments, media, economics, and education. What happens in these countries doesn't stay in them only for long. It spreads very fast. But it's not just politics. These countries are also where major social and political changes occurred. Think about things like civil rights, gender equality, and climate action. The church has shifted its opinions on things to align itself with these new Western values. These countries have become a testing ground for global social, religious, and political changes. Congrats on becoming the new pope. Super big accomplishment. Thanks. I can't wait to start helping people all around the world. Yeah, that's all great. You're gonna help Italy the most, right? Nuh-uh. I'm gonna focus my efforts globally. I'm gonna help people all over the world, not just Italy or Europe. Wow, I've never heard an Italian say something like that before. Dude, I'm Polish, not Italian. Wait a second. That would make you like the first non-Italian pope in like 455 years. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm the most important character in this chapter, dude. Well, that all was fun. But let's cut to the chase. What in the entire video was the most important person, idea, event, and location? For person, I'm gonna have to go with St. Paul. He's just the coolest. He's the best. He's the GOAT. You can't argue with that. For most important location, I'm gonna have to go with Europe. It's in everything. Everything relates back to Europe, even if it's talking about America. Where did people come from to found America? Europe. Most important event, I'm gonna have to go with the Industrial Revolution. It's shaped so much of our modern lives that it has to be. It has to be. There's nothing to compare. And for the most important idea, I'm gonna have to go with modernization. It's happening right now. It's happening in major ways right now within the church, within government. Go outside and see the church modernizing. You can go outside and see institutions modernizing.